Rabbi goes away.
You don't have to worry about weddings, that's all.
It's no fun to go away during the 3 weeks. Okay, Rabbi Isai, we're on the Mishnah and Daf Ayin Zayin Amud Aleph. Just want to review something that we saw introduced yesterday, which we're going to see again today. It is the Shita of Rabbi Eliezer in today's Mishnah, which is that even though there are certain things that are forbidden to be placed on top of the Mizbeach, nonetheless, sometimes they're only forbidden as a Reach Nichoach, if the objective is to bring them as an offering. But what if placing these things on the Mizbeach is for the purpose of adding fuel to the fire on the altar? So Rabbi Eliezer says then that's okay. And the example that's given is, as we'll see, and we'll get more into this today, Rabbi Eliezer holds that shirayim, anything that is a leftover from a korban mincha or a korban behema, where the leftover is meant to be consumed by human beings, there is a biblical prohibition of offering that on the Mizbeach. You're not allowed to put that on the Mizbeach, because once the primary portion that was meant for the Mizbeach is placed on the Mizbeach, nothing else that remains of that item can be put on the Mizbeach afterwards. So Rabbi Eliezer's chiddush is that that's only true vis-a-vis making it as a reach nichoach, making it as something that is meant as a savory fragrance for the Lord, as a form of offering. But if it's not meant as an offering, but it's meant just to add fuel to the fire as eitzim, as firewood, so then it's perfectly okay. We're going to see this again in today's Mishnah. The Mishnah says, Evarei chatas shenis arvu be'evarei ola. And this is another classic example. You've got limbs of two different kinds of animal. One is a korban ola, and one is a korban chatas. The limbs of a korban ola have to be placed completely on the mizbeach to be totally incinerated. The limbs of a korban chatas are meant to be consumed by the kohanim. Only the entrails of a korban chatas are on the mizbeach, but the remainder of the animal is eaten by the kohanim. So therefore you have a dilemma. You can't, this mixture of limbs contains both items that are meant for the Mizbeach and items that are prohibited to be placed on the Mizbeach. So what's your solution? So Rabbi Eliezer Omer Yitain Lamayla Veroa Anias Bisar Hachatas Milamayla Ki'ilu Hein Eitzim. So Rabbi Eliezer says, no problem. Put it all on top of the Mizbeach. The limbs that are part of the Ola, that are from the Ola, are burnt for Hashem as a korban, and the limbs that are from the Chatas are viewed as fuel that is being added to the fire. Okay, just like we spoke out. V'chachamim omrim to ubar tzurasan v'yetzu lebeis hasreifa. The chachamim disagree, and they say that no, you have to wait until the limbs decompose in some way or become no longer usable for the altar, and then you have to incinerate them somewhere off the altar. And there's what's called the beis hasreifa, someplace outside, right outside the temple, where they would incinerate discards that can no longer be used. And so this is the machlokas. It seems, at least according to this Mishnah, that the Chachamim hold that you don't say roin, that we look at it as if it's fuel. Once it's placed on the Mizbeach, de facto it's an offering, and if it's not allowed to be placed on the Mizbeach, then it can't be used for any reason. Okay, the Gemara now says, my time of the Rabbi Eliezer. So what's Rabbi Eliezer's reasoning? Amar Kra, ve'el hamizbeach lo ya'alu l'reach nichoach. Now, it's important to get the context of this pasuk. The Torah says, korban reshis. The subject of this pasuk is yeast and honey, soor and devash. Ki chol soor v'chol devash. Any yeast and honey may not be brought on the mizbeach. And it is known as korban reshis because it is potentially first fruit items. You can offer these things as your bikurim, from yeast and from honey, but you cannot place them on top of the mizbeach to create a reach nichoach, a savory fragrance on the altar. So what Rabbi Eliezer does is that he looks at this pasuk and he says as follows: L'reach nichoach iyatama'ale, avalatama'ale l'shem eitzim. What he says, basically what that means is that yeast and honey are only forbidden to be placed on the altar as an offering for reach nichoach. But to use as eitzim, to use as fuel, is perfectly legit. And to extrapolate beyond that, anything that's forbidden to be placed on the mizbeach may be placed if it's only for the purpose of fuel. V'Rabbanan mi'et rachmana osam. Osam hu di'i atamale, aval atamale l'shem eitzim, aval midi achrina lo. And the Chachamim say, we agree with your interpretation of the pasuk, but the pasuk limits itself only to yeast and honey. Only yeast and honey have that special dispensation that it cannot be brought as an offering, but can be placed on the altar for eitzim, for fuel. But anything else that's forbidden for the altar, regardless of your intent, may never be placed on the altar. And therefore, animal limbs from a chatos may not be placed on the altar regardless of your intent. V'Rebbe Eliezer osam hu deraboy lecha kevesh kamizbeach, avol midi achrina lo, v'Rabbanan tarti shema mina. So, and the Rabbanan's Rabbi Eliezer's response to that word osam, which seems to be limiting the whole issue to yeast and honey, says, I do agree that the pasuk is limiting itself to yeast and honey, but not vis-a-vis this special dispensation of using something forbidden for fuel is okay, but rather for a different halacha. The Torah says, El HaMizbeach. El HaMizbeach, that added preposition of El, teaches me that something that is adjacent to the Mizbeach is also a forbidden zone. So not only is the altar forbidden, but also the ramp going up to the altar is also forbidden. Forbidden for what? Forbidden only for yeast and honey. In other words, once a yeast and honey is forbidden, not only may you not place it on top of the altar, but you may also not place it on the ramp leading up to the altar. That's where the Torah limits itself only to yeast and honey. But as far as this differentiation, this bifurcation between the issue of reach nichoach versus eitzim, that differentiation applies to all things that are forbidden for the altar. They're only forbidden for the altar if it's l'reach nichoach, but not if it's for eitzim, and that applies not just to yeast and honey, but to everything. And the Rabbanan argue, and they say, no, if the Torah is limiting itself with the word osam only to yeast and honey, it's limiting itself for both. Not only to tell me that you cannot place yeast and honey on the ramp, but also to tell you that this dispensation that you can put a forbidden substance on the mizbeach if it's for fuel only applies to yeast and honey and to nothing else. Now, masnisin delo ki haitana. Our Mishnah, I read that already, and that's what I just spoke out. The Rabbah, I just spoke it out. Okay. Now, masnisin delo ki haitana. Our Mishnah now is in dispute with the following brisa. Now, what we're going to see from this following brisa is a totally different approach. Our Mishnah had told us that the machlokas between Rabbi Eliezer and the Chachamim is regarding a case where limbs of an ola get mixed with the limbs of a chatas. And there, Rabbi Eliezer says you look at the limbs of the chatas as fuel, and the Chachamim say, no, you cannot. However, this brisa has a different approach as to what the actual machlokas is. The Tanya, Amar Rabbi Yehuda lo nechlaku Rabbi Eliezer v'chachamim aleivori chata shenisarvu be'eivari ola sheyikarvu. That according to this brisa, both Rabbi Eliezer and the Chachamim hold that it is okay to place this mixture of ola and chatas limbs on the mizbeach, because according to this brisa, the rabbis agree, the Chachamim agree, that you can say, Rowan, you view the limbs of the chatas as fuel. Beroveya v'nir v'shalo yikarvu. And everyone also agrees, both Rabbi Eliezer and the Chachamim also agree, that if you have the limbs of an animal that was prohibited for the altar because it was used in a bestiality practice, that this animal, even if its limbs get mixed with another animal that is kosher, you cannot place that mixture of limbs on the mizbeach. Al ma nechlaku. So what taka is the machlokes? Al evari ola temima shenis arvu be'evari ba'alas mum. The machlokes is regarding a mixture of the following limbs. One animal was a perfectly legitimate ola animal, completely unblemished, and the other animal was also an ola, but it was discovered after it was dismembered that it was a balas mum, that it was a blemished animal. Here you have the machlokes. Rabbi Eliezer Omer yikarvu, v'ro ani lamala ki'ilu hein eitzim, v'chachamim omrim lo yikarvu. So Rabbi Eliezer says you can place this mixture of limbs of the balmum and the tamim on the mizbeach, and the chacham. Why? Because you view the blemished animal limbs as fuel, and the chachamim say you cannot. Now, of course, we have to try and understand this. If the chachamim hold that you can view the chatas limbs as fuel, why do they hold that you cannot view the blemished animal limbs as fuel? The Rabbi Eliezer Maishna Roveya Venirva Delo Chazu, Balas Mum Nami Lo Chazi. So the question now is, first, before we get to the chachamim, let's look at Rabbi Eliezer. Why is it that Rabbi Eliezer says that you can view the blemished animal's limbs as fuel, whereas if you have an animal that was used for bestiality and its limbs get mixed in with a regular korban's limbs, you cannot view it as fuel? What's the difference? Both an animal that was used for bestiality is pasul, and a balmum is pasul for the mizbech. So what's the difference? Amar Rav Huna beduken sheba'ayin va'aliba de Rabbi Akiva de Amar im olu lo yerdu. So Rav Huna says a big chiddush. He says that when the Brisa says that we're talking about the limbs of a blemished animal, it's not a standard blemish, which is overt and conspicuous, but rather it is a blemish that is very subtle because it's only in the white of the animal's eye. And in that situation, Rabbi Akiva said, because the mum is so subtle, then even though lechatchila you're not allowed to put this animal on the mizbeach, but b'di'evet, if it was placed on the mizbeach, it's kosher and you don't remove it. So the Gemara now says, and therefore that's what Rabbi Eliezer says, that in that situation, since it's such a subtle mum and it got mixed in with a kosher animal, you're allowed to put them up. So the Gemara says, but wait a minute, Eimer da'omer Rabbi Akiva di'i ovad, or lichatchila miyomar. But 1 second, Rabbi Akiva only says that b'di'evet, if this animal's limbs were placed on the mizbeach, you let it stay, you don't remove it. But lichatchila, Rabbi Akiva is never so permissive. So Amar Rav Papa hacha b'mayaskinan shekagon sha'alu al gabe kevesh. What happened is that these limbs already went up on the ramp. And since they already went up on the ramp, then Rabbi Akiva would agree, Kevin sha'olu lo yerdu. Once they went up, don't remove them, and it's fine. And that's what we're talking about. This mixture of limbs was already placed on the ramp leading up to the Mizbeach, and therefore even Rabbi Akiva would agree that Kevin sha'olu lo yerdu, once they went up, you don't remove them. So
but only in the case of the subtle mum? Or?
In the case of the subtle mum. So ihachi afilu be'einayu. So the Gemara says, but wait a minute. If that's your argument, so then why do you have to be dealing with a mixture of limbs from both a blemished animal and an unblemished animal? Right. Even if there was just a blemished animal and it was placed already up on the kevesh, according to Rabbi Akiva, you could leave it there. So why do you contrive the case of a mixture? So elatime de Rabbi Eliezer mi'et rachmana mumbam hu delo yeratzu al yedei taroves yeratzu. So it seems to me that the Gemara is now rejecting its original answer that we're talking about a subtle mum, and we're going back to the idea that it's a regular bal mum, it's a regular blemished animal, and Rabbi Eliezer has a shita as follows. He says that the only time that the Torah invalidates placing a bal mum on the mizbeach is only if it's by itself and not part of a larger mixture. And he learns it from the words mum bum. The blemish is in them. In them means that is the only object that you are dealing with being placed on the mizbeach. But if there are other objects, because this is part of a larger mixture, the Torah does not prohibit placing a balmum on the mizbeach. And that's why Rabbi Eliezer holds that it's okay to place it on the mizbeach as fuel, even though it's not something that can be actually, we'll see, the Gemara now says, V'Rabbanan mumbam hu delo yeratzu ha'avar mumam yeratzu. The Rabbanan have a different way of looking at the pasuk. They say, no, the pasuk is not telling you that if an animal is blemished and it's part of a mixture, you're allowed to put it on. Never can a blemished animal be placed on the mizbeach. What the Torah is limiting, though, is that if the animal's blemish is non-permanent, that's what it means, mumbam. The blemish is in them permanently. That's when it cannot be placed on the mizbeach. But if the blemish is only a fleeting blemish, it's something that is a temporary wound but will heal, so that's what the Torah is excluding and telling you that can go on the mizbeach. The Rabbi Eliezer mibam bahem V'Rabbanan bam bahem lo darshi. So the Gemara says, where does Rabbi Eliezer disagree? He says, I agree with you that the Torah is excluding a temporary blemish, but it's also excluding a blemish that is part of a larger mixture, because there are two exclusionary words that are in that pasuk. One is bam, and the other one is bahem. The Torah says, ki moshchasam bahem mum bam. Right? So those two words, bahem and bam, are excluding two things. One is excluding a temporary blemish from the prohibition, and the other one is excluding when a bal mum is part of a larger mixture of non-blemished animal limbs. So, and the Rabbanan disagree, and they say no. The Torah is only excluding one thing, it's not excluding two things, and the one thing that it's excluding is temporary blemishes, not mixtures. So, ihachi roa harachmana achshere. So then the question is like this. According to what you're saying, Rabbi Eliezer, if you're saying that the Torah only prohibits a bal mum when it is alone, but not when it's part of a mixture, so then why do you have to say that you view the bal mum limbs as fuel? You don't have to view it as fuel. The Torah basically said that it's kosher once it's part of a larger mixture. It's an acceptable form of avoda. So it's got nothing to do with viewing it as fuel. Even if it's l'reach nichoach, it's okay. So the Gemara answers, you're right. L'divrayim ka'amar lahu. Rabbi Eliezer is responding to the Chachamim's reasoning. Really, he's saying like this. L'didi rachmana achshere. According to me, where I hold that once a bal mum's limbs are part of a larger mixture, then it's acceptable for the mizbeach, then that's all I need. That's the only argument that I need. But l'didchu, but according to you, who hold, you the Chachamim who hold, that even a mixture of bal mum and non-bal mum limbs is prohibited by the Torah, but odu limiha basar balas mum ke'itzim dami, mididahava abasar chatas. At least you should admit to me, Chachamim, that just like you hold that you can view the chatas limbs that are mixed with the ola limbs as fuel, and therefore you can justify placing that mixture on the mizbeach, you should also agree with the case of blemished and unblemished limbs mixed together, that you can view the blemished limbs as fuel. In other words, I hold that it's perfectly okay. You don't need to make that argument, but at least you should be permissive of it based on the argument that you hold of by the chatas and ola limbs that are mixed together. So the Gemara answers, V'Rabbanan hacha mi'isi hasam lo mi'isi. So the answer is, and this is what we started with, is this is the reason why the Chachamim permit chatas and ola limbs mixed together, but do not permit mum and blemished and unblemished limbs mixed together. What's the difference? A blemished animal is ma'us. It is unseemly. It is something that is offensive to Hashem, to be placed on the mizbeach. Right. But a chatas limbs is prohibited, but it's not offensive.
Right.
So therefore, that's why there's the difference. You can say that something that's prohibited to be brought as an offering can be used as fuel because it's non-offensive by nature. But something that you cannot use as an offering, but is also offensive to Hashem because it is a bal mum, cannot even be used as fuel. Okay? So therefore you've got like three different levels according to this brisa. One type of mixture is where it's chatas and ola limbs mixed together. There's nothing offensive, and therefore even the Chachamim agree that you can view the chatas limbs as fuel. The second level is the bal mum mixed with regular limbs, where the Chachamim say that Torah still prohibits a bal mum as part of a mixture, and it's offensive, and therefore you can't say ro, and you can't say you view it as fuel. And the third level, where even Rabbi Eliezer agrees, is the case of where a animal used for bestiality gets its limbs mixed with a regular carbon's limbs. There, everyone agrees that it's not permitted, even when it's part of a mixture, and it's offensive, and therefore even Rabbi Eliezer would agree that you don't say roim, you don't say you view it as fuel.
And in that middle category, even though it's less offensive because it's subtle or it's temporary.
No. We're not dealing with subtle or temporary blemishes in the final analysis.
No, I'm talking in the middle category about offensive to Hashem, and that's why you don't put the mum in there.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter whether it's a permanent mum or a subtle.
Correct. Even it seems from the conclusion of the Gemara that even a regular mum, according to Rabbi Eliezer, if it's part of a larger mixture, was never prohibited by the Torah. Right. According to the Chachamim, is. Right. And the reason why you don't say roim, you don't say that you view it as fuel, is because it's offensive.
Right.
Okay.
Thank you.
Sure. Next Mishnah. Evarin be'evar. Now, this was all according to the Brisa, but the Mishnah and the Brisa disagree with each other as to what exactly the machlokas between Rabbi Eliezer and the Chachamim is. So now we're going back to our Mishnah. Remember, our Mishnah maintains that even when there's a mixture of chatas limbs and ola limbs, that this is a machlokas between Rabbi Eliezer and the Chachamim as to whether you even hold of the principle of roim, of whether you can view the chatas limbs as fuel or not. Now, evarim be'evarim ba'alei mumin. Now we go to the next case, the next level, which is what we discussed before, when you have limbs of a regular animal, regular korban, and the limbs of a balmum, and they get mixed together. So Rabbi Eliezer Omer im karav rosh echad mehen yikarvu kol haroshim, Kira'ayim shel echad mehem yikarvu kol ha'kira'ayim. So Rabbi Eliezer's shita is like this. He holds, and he's the more liberal of the two, he holds that I agree that this mixture is problematic, not like the Brisa had said before, but he agrees in our Mishnah that the combination of balmum and non-balmum is problematic, so lechatchila you cannot put any of it on the Mizbeach, but there's one dispensation. Let's say you have two animals that got mixed together. One was a balmum and one was a regular kosher tamim animal. And before you discovered that one of the animals was a balmum, you already placed the head of one of these two animals on the Mizbeach. So Rabbi Eliezer says, what I will permit you to do is to assume that the one that was already placed and burned on the Mizbeach was the mum animal, and you can assume that the one that hasn't yet been placed is the non-mum animal. And therefore go ahead and place the head of the second one on the Mizbeach. In other words, I will not permit you to place both of them, both heads on the Mizbeach, because invariably one of them is balmum. But what I will permit is that, and even let's say there's 5 or 10 animals that got mixed together, and only one of them is a balmum. As long as you put the head of one of them on the Mizbeach, you can put all of the other heads on the Mizbeach with the assumption that the one you already put is the balmum. Or the head is only an example. We can say, well, the intestinal column, the stomach, whatever it is. As long as you put the stomach of one, you can put all of the other stomachs on as well. The Chachamim disagree. And they say, no, you can't make such a leniency. Even if all of the animal parts were already placed on the Mizbeach, and there's just one animal part that's remaining off the Mizbeach, you must be choshesh that is part of the balmum, and you may not place it on the Mizbeach. The Gemara now says, Omer Rabbi Elazar. The Amora Rabbi Eliezer, in explaining this machlokas, says, Lo hichsha Rabbi Eliezer el shnayim shnayim, avol echad echad lo. That we're limiting Rabbi Eliezer's leniency. When he said that as long as one head was placed on the Mizbech, we allow you to put the other heads on, that's only if you have at least 2 heads remaining. Because why? Because 2 heads are always better than 1. No,
Rabbi, I was tempted. I was training myself.
I'm sorry.
I really did.
That was too easy. Okay.
I've been holding back on not going out on a limb. I mean, I've just been very restrained this morning.
Okay, well, I thank you, Paul. You know, the Gemara says, Malkam higdiru lo avosa, that sometimes, you know, if you come up with a chiddush, it's because your ancestors allowed you, they left space for you to come up with that chiddush. So thank you for leaving room for me to come up with that pun. So the Gemara, so Rabbi Elazar says you can only, Rabbi Eliezer's leniency is only if there are 2 heads that you're going to put on the Mizbeach, because when you're placing 2 heads, you know for sure that at least one of them is not the balmum.
Does this mean that, let's say you had 8 animals that got mixed in together?
Right, one of them is a balmum.
One's a balmum. All right, so one was put on, so now you...
The head of one was put on.
Right, now you have 7 left.
7 heads.
So you put them on 2 by 2. Does that mean you have one that you can't put on?
No, you could put the last set as 3.
Can you put 3?
Yeah, because the whole idea is you have to make sure that you're not not isolating one that could potentially be the balmum.
No, I just want to know if it was
Right.
limiting it to 2 by 2s or it just
Right.
meant a group.
It has to be a grouping, right? Okay, so Masiv Rabbi Yirmiyah. So Rabbi Yirmiyah challenges that assertion of Rabbi Elazar. What did the Mishnah say? V'chachamim omrim afilu karvu kulan chutz me'echad mehem yetzi lebeis hasreifa. So he says, but the language of the Mishnah in looking at the Chachamim's opinion implies just the opposite. Because what do the Chachamim say? That even if all the limbs except for one was already placed on the Mizbeach, you could not place that one limb, remaining limb, on the Mizbeach out of a fear that it may be from the Baal Mum. What does that imply? That Rabbi Eliezer holds the opposite, that you could place that one limb on the Mizbeach. So doesn't that show, even if it's not a group, even if it's not two, but it's only one limb, you could, according to Rabbi Eliezer, place it on the Mizbeach?
Isn't it just the mirror? We're looking at a mirror image. According to Rabbi Eliezer, once you put one on, you can assume it's the moon.
Yeah.
And the Chachamim are saying you can't assume any of them are the moon.
That's right. You have to be choshesh that the last remaining limb is from a Baal Mum. But the point is that the language itself implies that Rabbi Eliezer argues with this assertion of the Chachamim. The Chachamim say that even if there's one limb left, you cannot make any assumptions and you can't place it on the Mizbeach. By inference, Rabbi Eliezer says you could, which means that even if there's only one limb, without being part of a pair, you could place it on the Mizbeach. So doesn't that challenge what you've just asserted, Rabbi Elazar? So Amar Lo, so he said back to him, and the Girsa changes, Amar Lo, Rabbi Yaakov le-Rabbi Yirmiyah. So Rabbi Yaakov responded to Rabbi Yirmiyah's question and said, Bar Tachlifa asper alach, Bar Tachlifa can explain this to you. My echad, zug echad. It doesn't mean one limb is remaining, it means a pair of limbs is remaining. And only then will Rabbi Eliezer permit you to place it on. And let's just do the Mishnah to finish. The Mishnah says, Dam shenis arev b'mayim, im yesh bo maris adam kosher. The principle is like this. You have blood that you've prepared to do zrikas adam. Zrikas adam is the most pivotal and important action of the avoda, because once you do zrikas adam, the korban has achieved its atoning power, its atoning element. So what happens if the blood gets tampered with before you have a chance to do zrika? It spills into a bucket of water. So the question is the blood still kosher for doing zrika? So the Mishnah says it depends how diluted the blood is. Mm-hmm. If the mixture of blood and water still looks like blood, so then since the appearance is bloody, you're allowed to do zrika. But if it's so dilute that it no longer looks like blood, so then you can no longer do zrika. Nisarev biyayin, rowan oso ki'ilu humayim. Let's say the blood spills not into a bucket of water, but spills into a bucket of red wine. Now it's impossible to determine what its appearance is as far as dilution ratio. So you have to imagine that instead of falling into a bucket of wine, it fell into a bucket of the same volume of water. And basically you do the experimentation and say that if the ratio of blood to wine were this wine water, the blood would be so diffuse that it would no longer look like blood, then I can no longer do the zrika. But if the ratio still gives it this imaginary water the appearance of blood, then you can do the zrika. Next, nisarev bedam behema o bedam chaya, rowan oso ki'ilu humayim. Similarly, if the sacrificial blood spills into a bucket of non-sacrificial blood, such as the blood of a chulin animal that's either a behema or a chaya, so you do the same kind of theoretical thought experiment and say, if we would imagine this non-sacrificial blood as water, and this blood, the sacrificial blood fell into it, how diffuse would it be in the water? Would it still retain its appearance of blood or not? And that's the criteria. Now, Rabbi Yehuda Omer, ein dam mivatel dam. Rabbi Yehuda just disagrees on this last statement. And he says, he has this principle that applies throughout Maseches Chulin, which is min b'mino eino bata. That when you have two items that are of the same kind, one is permitted and one is prohibited, then you never have bittul. You can never totally be mevatel one substance from another. One substance can never be considered nullified in another. And therefore, if you have a small amount of sacrificial blood that falls into a bucket of chulin blood, no matter how disproportionate the ratios are, no matter even if there's a huge amount of non-sacrificial blood and a small amount of sacrificial blood, and that's all you have left, you can still do zrika because the sacrificial blood is never batel in the non-sacrificial blood. And that's only when it comes to blood and blood. Blood and water, Rabbi Yehuda would agree that if it's so diffuse it doesn't have its appearance anymore, it'll be batel. But when it's min b'mino, it's never batel.
So we'd agree on that test for wine. You just have to go to the water.
Yeah, the only point he's arguing on is blood. Now, nisarev bidam pesulin yishafech la'ama. Bidam hatamtzis yishafech la'ama. Now, the next halacha is what Rashi says is all a gezeras chachamim, that really technically it would still work, but the chachamim were gozer on the following two cases, that in the following two cases of blood mixtures, we force you to discard the blood, and you got to start all over again. If the blood fell into dam pesulim, if it spilled into blood of a sacrificial animal that was pasul, let's say I brought an animal that was used for bestiality and I brought it as a carbon and I take its blood and I leave it in a bucket and the sacrificial blood of a kosher animal gets mixed into that blood. Even if it's not that diffuse and you still have a valid amount of sacrificial blood such that if the pasul blood was water, you would still have its appearance. The Chachamim say that because of a takana, we don't allow you to use this blood at all and it has to be spilled into the duct for discarded blood. And the same thing is true with dam hatamsis. Dam hatamsis is non-life force blood, which means after the main flow of blood, there's remaining blood within the entire carcass of the animal, in its tissue and so forth. If you take some of that blood and you mix the sacrificial blood meant for zrika into that other blood, then no matter what the ratios are, we don't allow you to use that blood midirabanan, and you have to discard it all. Rabbi Eliezer machshir, and Rabbi Eliezer says no, that too will be kosher provided that you have the sufficient ratios. But imlo nimlach v'nasan kosher. But everyone seems to agree that if you didn't consult, you didn't ask a shaila, and some of the regular kosher blood got mixed in with the pasul blood or the tamtzis blood, and you did the zrika, then b'di'evet it's kosher. Why? Because this is all an Isser D'Rabbanan to begin with. It's not an Isser D'Oraisa, so therefore, b'di'evet, if you did the zrika without asking a shaila, the korban is kosher. Have a wonderful day, a good Erev Shabbos.
I'm surprised, Rabbi, they don't talk about the blood of the ball moon.